Hello and welcome to my workshop. So we're getting back on the Dodge M37 build. We made a lot of good progress on this. We want to continue on with that. I'm going to be focusing on getting a lot of the details on the cab and the bed, possibly getting this roof section finished up, maybe some canvas, and if we got time, work on the front bumper and radiator. Alright, so let's get started. So here I'm trying to get some of the final details for the cab worked out. Stuff like adding in the door handles, which were on order. Cutting in the basically the accent line or the body lines for the doors. And right there, I'm just using it as a Tamiya scribe tool. And so it just basically just drag it along several times, and it just kind of digs out a little channel, which gives you that body line. So I'm using the same door handles for inside and out, so I just drill a tiny hole, make sure not to go all the way through, and then glue that in. So these are going to be the hinges I'm using. I kind of looked at a couple different ideas of how to make these, and ended up just decided to make them out of styrene. So essentially what it is just a couple styrene blocks put together. And what I'm doing is I'm shaping the end piece while it's on the longer styrene rod. Gives me something to hold on to, and then I can cut that off and then do the final shaping and get that glued onto the body. So there are window support brackets that go on the side, and so they have a plate that goes up against the body and an angled piece that then goes against another plate that goes up to the windshield, and that allows it to pivot down. So right now I'm just basically taking and making that bottom plate, taking some styrene round pieces, doing a little bit of a filing, gluing them on, and getting that shape file down so I could then add on that final hinge piece to the top. So before I can add those features on, I want to make sure I get it sanded really well and get any of those body lines drug in with that Tamiya scribe tool. So the mirrors I bought for this they look really good. They're not exactly the same mirrors that would come on this, but what I like about them is they're rubber mirrors, and so that you won't break when you go on the trail, which is one of the things that typically happens with a harder mirror. And they do look very realistic as far as the style. So I wanted to space them out just a little bit, so I just put like a little small block on the side. So now I'm adding that hinge piece for the windshield, and so I'm just trying to get that shape correct, going back and forth to the reference material, and then cutting that thing out, getting it sanded down, and then it just glues on. It's not going to function, and the windshield's not going to fold down, but I want to get the look just right. So most of the time for these bodies I'm using a 60 thousandths thick styrene, but I do have other thicknesses, and they come in real handy for making little parts like this. You don't really want that thickness that you would like on a body on a part, because it just doesn't look realistic. So you have 20 thousandths, 30 thousandths, 10, 15. There's all kinds of thicknesses that you'd work with, and like I said, they do come in handy for little parts like this. So just adding some detail in the front. So I drill a tiny hole and insert a 3D printed nut, and it just has a little shank that goes in there to be glued in place, and then it gives you the realistic view of a nut. So I've been adding on pieces to the cab, trying to get that detailed out. Things like cutting in the door panel lines, adding hinges, this little windshield bracket with some little resin, no, it's 3D printed scale hardware here. Also added on a little bit of scale hardware here in the front, and I still have a lot more of stuff like that to go. One of the things I want to get done is had this jerry can and make a mount for that. It's going to attach down to the fenders and back here. The headlight bracket. There's just so many little things to get done to kind of get this thing finished up. I think my goal now is to get all the little pieces added on here, light sand, and possibly some color out of here. So let's just continue on. So the jerry can is actually just a regular part that you can get any scale item. You'll see these around. It comes with like a clip-on style mount. But what I wanted to do was make a mount that's very realistic to what would be on the side. So essentially I'm just making this cradle in the bottom and coming up with a support structure in the back to glue it on. And then on the bottom I'll end up adding in some braces that brace the bottom of the structure to the fender. So I get the angle just right. I'll end up clipping some of that material down, putting it on, trying to check things out, make sure it's right. And then nice tip to use is like a good flat bench. Put a piece of sandpaper down, and you can sand larger sections or two pieces that need to be on the same plane but are apart from each other, and you can get those things nice and flat that you really can't do by hand. So here are those little braces underneath. So I just take a strip of styrene, bend it in shape, and because you cold bend that styrene, if you put any kind of solvent glue on there, it's just going to shatter. And so what I'll end up with that is that there's really no structure there. It doesn't need to be strong with the solvent glue. So super glue will work just fine. So I just basically put a dab of super glue on, hold it in place for a second or two, and then it's good to go. So on the hood, like I've done so many times before, I'm taking an actual functioning hinge and then making it non-function. So what I end up doing for these hinges is that I take a little bit of super glue from the backside, and I'll try to work that down into the barrel, I guess they call it, of the hinge, basically where the thing pivots, and lock that hinge into place. And what that allows me to do is then cut both ends off without the hinge just falling to pieces. So I've taken a really wide hinge, glued it together so it's one piece now, and then cut down the side to make it the right shape. So for the front, I decided to use these axial light buckets. They really are almost perfect in shape to what the real M37 light buckets are. Now they're just a tad small for the size of this truck here. They are, I think, more scaled down to like 1/10. Well, in reality, most of these vehicles are not 1/10. They're in the 1/9 range, maybe even a little smaller. 1/8.5, I think, is what this scale actually works out to be. But it's so close. It's just a millimeter or two off. And the advantage of having that really nice looking shape, I think, outweighs the fact that they're going to be just a tad small. So the tool storage has a shovel, this pickaxe, and then a regular axe. So I have the shovel, I have the regular axe, but I just couldn't find a good pickaxe. And I started thinking that I remembered when I got this Fortnite, they had this gigantic, goofy looking pickaxe. So I started looking at it, I realized that, hey, this thing is way big, but it's enough material I can cut this thing down. So luckily it was a soft rubber material, but it was hard enough that you could sand it, which I said, I can work with that. So I'm basically just cutting down that Fortnite piece and turning it into what a pickaxe would actually look like. So for the regular axe, the handle just isn't right for the shape of the axe, and you really need a longer handle. You just typically don't see them that way. So I found a piece of dowel that I had in my shop, and it had a really nice bend on it, which is perfect. And so I'm just taking a Dremel, rotary tool there, and carving that thing down to make it look like a regular axe handle. So you can see you get the length just right, and what I'm ending up doing is just basically taking and kind of carving down the end to make a little tang that I could then glue on the axe handle. So the shovel was really a puzzle to me. I was trying to figure out a really good way to have the handle in the back, because the one that comes in this M37 has that that cross handle built in the back of it. So this is the nose bridge for a pair of cheap magnifying glasses I have, and I ended up not using the nose bridge. So I'm just basically taking that rotary tool and a cutoff wheel and simply carving that metal down to a shape that's similar to the side pieces that would come up on that handle for the back of the shovel. So you can see there, I just cut it down a length, get it shaped correctly. I use my little hand vise there to hold it so that I can get a good grip on it without getting too close to the cutoff wheel. And then not too long, you have a pretty good shaped handle for the shovel, and you just add a piece of styrene rod in there, and you're done. So now that I have all the tools made, I can focus on getting the actual rack done. And so I'm starting off with a thin sheet of styrene as a base structure, and I'm adding in, I believe it was 1/8 angle styrene around the edge to build up the outside frame, and then just adding in different pieces to basically match up to where the supports and tie down points are on the real one. So having that thin piece of styrene at the bottom is a good tip for when you're making these, a frame like this. You might want to make like a little small box or top, or any number of things where you have a very weak joint going together where you have those pieces going around. You put that thinner layer of styrene that connects it all together, and it doesn't really change the look of it that much, but it really does add a lot of strength to it. So like I said, trying to just get some of the pieces in that were, serve as tie down points, and the axe has a actual box that the axe head kind of slips into. So for the end pieces, they have this. It looked like just like a piece of rod that they bent into different shapes, and so the axe handle slips in, and the handle for the pickaxe goes around, and you can kind of strap stuff in. So I just took a piece of rod and bent it into shape. Did the same thing for the end where the shovel goes, and just super glued those on into place. So most of the details for the cab are finished up here. There's still a lot of little things to do, but nothing that's really focusing on the cab. Like I have to get the radiator in. That should be a bolt-in piece. The grill and all these bolt-on, so it's not stuff I have to worry about. The paint. I just still have to get the strap for the jerry can on the side. Obviously put the windows and a couple little details around that. But for the most part, everything is done. There's a lot of little scale hardware that I've added on. Some of it is resin cast that I made with the this little green stuff. I guess it's like a little rivet mold kit. It has all different kinds of shapes and sizes. Some of them are 3D printed parts actually. It's little nuts that you just basically drill a small hole and center it in. A lot of just little scraps of thin styrene to represent a part that would normally pop up, but just to give it a little bit of detail. Carved in panel lines, door handles, door hinges. Just try to really do a good job of representing all the individual little pieces and parts that are on the real M37. So like I said, got this in a pretty good state. I still have like I said, still have more work to do, but I'm going to start focusing on the bed and try to get that pretty well at the same state where this is. And the last part I'll go through and just kind of get all the final details put in and finished up. Alright, so let's get to that. So these are, I guess, would be like bearing supports for the tailgate, and it's just a piece of brass that I had laying around, and I bent it into shape, and then just kind of cut that down on my bandsaw, and that way both pieces would end up being the same profile. So essentially did the same thing for these little, I guess they're little tie down points, or I'm not really sure what they're used for, but it's just basically a piece of brass. I bent it into shape, split it on the bandsaw, and that way both of them have the same exact profile together. So this is just adding in some hardware along the back. And so these little blue mats there are silicone molds that hold a resin cast, and they're basically the shape of nuts and screws and different rivets and stuff. So I was lucky enough to have an actual wood color for the axe handle, but the rest needed to be painted. So I just took a couple different paints, kept mixing them until I finally come up with a color that's pretty close to the wood color I have for the handle, and then I just painted those to match. Now most of the ones I saw on were most of the stuff was black or either just all painted green, but the one that I'm matching up has a red axe handle, a red axe I guess, and a red handle for the shovel, and it's black shovel, and the pickaxe was I believe it was green. So I'm just painting it to match the colors that are on the real one. These are tiny little pieces I'm making to be for the tailgate chain. So what I'll actually end up using is a cheap necklace from Hobby Lobby, and it's just the right scale detail for a chain. And I use some of the fixings that come with the necklace and some other pieces I have laying around, make the styrene supports, and then I can attach all that together, and it'll flop around like a real chain, and it'll look just like pretty much close as you can imagine getting to that for being at that scale. So I think these are like storage compartments. They would go up underneath the bed, and they have a hinge on the bottom and a handle. I don't have the handle yet. I'm waiting on that to come in the mail. But just basically just take a piece of styrene, glue it down, glue a thin rod at the bottom to represent the piano hinge, and that's really all it is. To really get into kind of what I thought was going to be a pretty tricky part of this build, and that is building the front grille, I guess bash bar or whatever you want to call this thing, but it's a piece that goes around both lights and the radiator in the front. So what I went a couple of things back and forth, and I thought about using brass, but what I ended up doing was just taking a piece of thin sheet metal, and you can see I took 10 snips and cut some strips down, and then I'm just being able to bend that into the shape I want, and silver solder the ends together. And it is kind of flimsy as it's being built, but once this thing is put together, it's surprisingly strong and really adds a lot of rigidity to the front of this. So another benefit to this, the grill and the way I built it, is that you're actually using real bolts to bolt that thing down through the fenders on both sides, and both pieces on the covering the lights are connected to the center grill with silver solder. So when you actually bolt that together, it actually ties both fenders together and makes them really strong. So if anything gets hit when it's on the trail, it's going to really help support those fenders, which are kind of vulnerable sticking out there on their own, which I guess is why this thing is put down there to begin with. So it was a little bit tedious getting all the center parts together. Now I had essentially they're just thin pieces of steel, and they're just rod, and I'm cutting those down to length and placing them in one at a time and silver soldering both sides, and then the hard part is getting them all lined up and straight and to look right. Now the one saving grace about this is that even the ones from the factory weren't perfect, so the welds were kind of off. I've looked at some of them that were pretty janky, but so I think what I'm doing is going to be very realistic, even though it's not perfect. So I think we're at a pretty good place to stop for this video. We really have got a lot accomplished, and it's really starting to look, pretty much just like the original truck here. Starting here in the front, we have this grill guard. Covers up the radiator and the lights. So this is just a piece of steel cut down with some 10 snips and bent into shape. Silver soldered some steel rods in here for the grill and to give it that look. Behind there is a little simple radiator, and that's just expanded PVC with some styrene bits glued on. Use a scribe tool to cut the lines in, and you get a nice simple radiator. You paint it black. It's mostly hidden anyway, but I think that does look pretty nice back there. Obviously the green camo paint is on. There may be some touch-ups and stuff depending on what I need to do still to this, but it pretty much is going to be like this. I have a lot of the details added on, the little screws and bolts, the handles and stuff. There's probably a few more to go. One of the things I was able to do is put the bezel thing that goes on these axial light buckets. And what it is, I just cut the front grill part off, sanded that down, and clipped them on, and it gives them a little bit of extra heft or beef to the light, so it makes it look a little closer to the scale of the real one. I still have some details on the interior, but that's getting really close. I got the bed for the most part, I think, done. I have to get the tools in and lash them down, but I want to wait till I'm pretty confident I'm done with the painting. I also have to get things like the little door handles. There's a couple little places on here that probably need to get touched up, and so that's why I'm kind of waiting on doing any kind of final detail to make sure I got the the final coat of camo paint on. But it's really is starting to look pretty good here. And I think the next time we're going to work on this, we'll be getting to the bumper in the front and the bumperettes in the rear. We're going to make a running board here on either side, and make the canvas top. And I'll obviously be doing all the rest of the detailing and painting, but we can knock that out in the next video, no problem. Really looking forward to getting this thing finished up. Lots of other fun things coming up. Until then, we'll see you in the rocks.